Everybody. This is Tim Reagan, and I want to thank you very much for listening to my talk. Now, we're all familiar with the gig economy and its economic and business drivers. So the question you're probably asking yourself right now is, what is the free agent economy and how does it differ from the gig economy? So that's where we'll start right after I provide a brief bio on me and where I'm coming from. Now, thriving in the free agent economy, and what this talk covers, is the theme that underpins all of the work and interests these days that I do. I'm focused on building toolkits and products and service offerings that ultimately enable people to not only survive, but to fully thrive in this new world. Now, I've just now started my own third major career phase. The first piece was 20 years as a traditional employee, gaining as much varied experiences as I could and getting runtime with a lot of different tools from all the different silos. The next phase was 15 years as a free agent myself, figuring out over time what I love to do and what I was profoundly gifted at doing. So lots more experimentation and lots of increasing clarity as time marched on. And now my third career, just a year or two into it, is working to operationalize, automate, and package my own extensive IP and capabilities into scalable, sellable products, some of which we'll touch upon in this talk. So I'm now on the path of evolving from free agent to a more traditionally focused entrepreneur and business operator. So, okay, here's the basic outline for this talk. First, I'm going to quickly define the gig economy so that we're all on the same page, and I'll attempt to characterize it by showing how big it is, how fast it's growing, and all that. Now, the data on this is pretty fluid, but it does all point in the same general direction, which is a continuing and even accelerating disruption of our complete society and all of our institutions. And as currently conceived and driven by most platform investments and business models, this gig economy risks being a massive race to the bottom with a lot of pain and anguish in store for those who are not properly prepared. So I'm also going to suggest that this trend to this kind of gig work is unstoppable. The genie is out of the bottle and pretty much impossible to put back in. And I'm not even convinced that we should attempt to rebottle it. But really, that heads into a values and ethics discussion, and I don't really want to spend too much time there in this talk. As an engineer, as a practically minded person, I'm seeing the evolution of the gig economy and what I'm going to reframe as the free agent economy as almost unstoppable. And so the practical side of me wants to help develop tools and capabilities and insights so that we can manage it more effectively, as opposed to having a discussion, ethics and morals discussions about whether or not it is right and good. That is perhaps a different conversation. This is much more about it's coming, here's what we need to do about it. So I want to explore what it looks like if we flip the gig economy on its head and reframe it as the free agent economy. And I'll try to define that, or at least give some specific examples of what that looks like and how it holds the promise for being a much more powerful, engaging model for us to work with. And if the notion of the free agent economy is more palatable and engaging than its gig economy alter ego, then I want to explore 4 major enablers that will dramatically improve our chances of successfully managing through the severe turbulence ahead of us and reducing the negative impacts of these disruptions. So that's what this talk is going to cover. Now, there's lots of different definitions abound about the gig economy, and they're all a little too generic and imprecise. So here are 4 basic characteristics that I believe we can all agree on and will help us to be on the same page. First, gig work is episodic. In general, it is highly transactional in nature, which means that it has a clear start and end position. There is a defined outcome, and the pay is most often linked to that defined, agreed outcome. Now, gigs are temporary. This is point number 2. There is no long-term guarantee that the same gig worker will continue to get the same kind of gig from the same supplier. It can happen, but it is not an obligation of the gig employer. Number 3 is that the economics of having work done through gig workers is generally seen to be cheaper on a per defined outcome basis. Now, this is not necessarily because people are being paid less for the defined outcome, but because they are generally not being paid for non-outcome producing downtime, as in the case of traditional full-time employment. And point number 4 is that gig employment terms do not generally include any non-outcome based benefits or compensation. So no pension, no health care, no RRSP matching component or a 401k component, no insurance, etc. The gig worker is essentially providing a unit of labor in exchange for payment and no other considerations. So if you think about those 4, gig work is episodic, gigs are temporary. The economics generally supports that gig workers are paid less than employees for a defined outcome. Important to note that it's not necessarily because they're being paid less, but there is less downtime that they have to be paid for. And finally, gig employment terms generally are payment only and no real benefits or other considerations. Now, here are just a few of the gig economy platform companies that are out there. The best known are probably Uber, Airbnb, TaskRabbit, and Elance, which is now Upwork. Now, new ones are springing up every day. We're still in the very early days, the wild, wild west days of industry formation. Now, the new gig companies that we're seeing are really just a new category of platform companies with these operational characteristics. Through their platform, they connect a type of worker with potential customers and/or customer projects. In all cases, to actually be successful in the market, they need some sort of focus around either worker, customer, project type, or compensation level. Now, some are focused on specific outcomes. Uber and Lyft organize and match potential drivers with people seeking location-specific rides. Fiverr started out by matching up buyers and sellers of any project that can be agreed and delivered for $5. And just like in the case of the dollar stores in the real world, there has been inflation, and most of the prices on Fiverr are now a lot more than $5. Now, another point is that the platform generally takes care of the matching algorithms, the outcome and contract agreement, payment terms, and actual payment once service has been rendered. They also generally provide ratings for both buyers and sellers to add to the knowledge, credibility, and transparency for future market users. Now, lots of different kinds of people fit into the gig economy. The main group is those doing it by choice, either as their only income source or as supplemental income. This is estimated at about 70% of the overall market participants. Now, the other 30% are those that are forced into being gig workers because they can't find full employment or need to supplement their traditional employment earnings with extra gig work. And by all measures, the gig economy is growing. Decent numbers are a bit sketchy here because of all the definitional and classification issues. However, they're all generally converge on estimates that are about 30% of the North American workforce participating in the gig economy. That's a current number, and that's projected to grow faster than overall employment growth. So over time, the gig workers are becoming a bigger and bigger percentage of the overall workforce. And the gig economy is happening everywhere around the globe, although at different rates of evolution. So, is the gig economy really a race to the bottom? Now, here's the emerging reality. As these new gig platforms mature, generally the pay per outcome has fallen and is continuing to fall. Now, this makes complete sense when you think about the openness and connectivity of these gig platforms. More and more owners of cars can sign up with Uber and Lyft, and the supply of drivers is growing much faster than the demand for the service. So prices fall, because that is one of the key mechanisms that Uber has for influencing more transactions. That's good for Uber, but not quite so good for the driver whose cost structure, the car, insurance, gas, maintenance, etc., doesn't change, but now each trip is generating less revenue. Now, in various studies of Uber, they've shown that the net income in some jurisdictions is as little as $6 per hour after all cost structures are included. Now, of course, something, you might consider something like Elance or Upwork or Fiverr as skilled project gig platforms. Now, the most immediate way to differentiate your service offering is by listing a lower price than your competitors, all of whom are listed on the same business, on the same platform. So now I'm cruising through a bunch of listings, for example, for business plan creation that might be in the $20 to $50 mark, with a high price shown of perhaps $200. Now, despite having some differentiation and information flow available through service ratings, these generally don't really prepare you for what you will receive, as a lot of gaming of ratings goes on. There's a natural drift of pricing downwards in this type of model as new entrants join and initially compete on price to get some traction, which tends to keep prices dropping for everybody else. Now, who is most affected by this and how? So consider Latin America, where GDP per person is about 30% of US levels, or emerging Asia at 20% of US levels. Now, as a skilled business plan writer living in a developing economy, participating in a skills platform like Upwork or Fiverr looks really promising and is possibly financially quite rewarding. For a North American used to earning a middle-class income and now having to participate on the same gig economy skills platform to generate my income, this is all very scary. So what we're really seeing with the emergence of the gig economy is the realignment of haves and have-nots. Now, in the 20th century, being a have was all about having access to institutional education, leading to good, secure jobs, pensions, benefits, and the like. That was the dream, and for the middle class, that was generally the reality. In the 21st century, being a have is now going to be about having basic literacy, being highly motivated and self-directed, being persistent, being willing and able to continually reskill and upskill yourself, and willing to put yourself out there, both virtually and in real life, to position and sell your services for your entire working life. So the Western economy's professional middle class suffers the most disruption. It's hollowing out. Roles that are built solely on the gaining and retention of knowledge, like much of law, medicine, accounting, and other middle-class professions, are rapidly getting automated and are under extreme pricing and restructuring pressure. From a Western societal perspective, this is a monumental problem, since our middle class is designed to be the great shock absorber of our Western society. The middle class tends to welcome security and predictability and rule of law, and so generally have supported policies that maintain those characteristics of society. But as we, who are middle class and by definition historic haves, wrestle with facing a future where it's clear that we are going to become have-lesses, we're going to start to resist and agitate and demand a return to the good times, which I think helps explain at least some of the rise of pluralism across much of the developed world today. It provides some valuable context for the rise of Brexit, for Trump, for nationalism. Now, having said that, we, the middle class here today, enjoying the waning days of our have status, would do well to realize that this is only an onslaught to the current power structure, which includes ourselves. To everyone else, the other 85% of the global population, this looks like unprecedented opportunity to get ahead as individuals. And as I said earlier, let's not even waste our breath musing about putting the genie back in the bottle. I just don't see any way that this is actually possible. When you think of it, the internet plus buckets of venture money plus new ideas always leads to continually increasing levels of innovation and disruption. And innovation flows along the path of least resistance globally, and the disruptions of existing institutions and social norms follows shortly thereafter. We're going to have to learn to live with this and adapt our own expectations and actions accordingly. Now, what this graph is showing is the distribution by income levels of US economy gig workers versus traditional employees. Given the early days of decent data underpinning gig economy studies, you might want to take this data with a pinch of salt. However, there are a couple of observations that we can make that will be useful to our thinking. Now, the small red circle to the left shows that in the lowest levels of income, a greater percentage of workers are now gig. So almost 1 in 3 versus 1 in 4 for traditional workers. So the rapid hollowing out of the traditional workforce is happening at the lowest income levels first. They are the first to be disrupted, most likely because their service offerings are not typically thought of as highly differentiatable. They are retail workers, taxi drivers, cleaning staff, baristas, and other low-income, generally undifferentiated roles. And here, the outsourcing model that drives the gig economy is taking hold fast. Now, on the other end of the spectrum is the small green circle at the far right side, which I think illustrates the promise of the free agent economy. That is, in higher value roles where gig workers are delivering much more highly valued and differentiated work products, they are more attracted to being independents rather than traditionally employed. They can earn the same money while being free to pick and choose their assignments and align them with the life flexibility that they want to follow. So if this model makes sense, then what we want to do, at least conceptually, is grow the green circle from the small green circle at the right into the big green oval that takes over most of the screen. And what we're doing here is growing the green circle back into lower income segments. And at the same time, we want to restrict the growth of the red circle from cannibalizing higher income segments. So how can we actually do that? Well, the first thing to understand is that the biggest part of being a free agent is the mindset. So let's say that I find myself having to work at 2 minimum wage roles that combine to full-time hours just to have enough cash to live. Now, in fact, I still find that it doesn't generate enough spare cash, and I'm always stressed about money. So with the few available free hours I have, I now sign up to drive an Uber and make an extra 50 to $100 a week to make my life work better. Now, of course, I hate spending my free time doing this, and because of that, I've got a pretty short fuse for my passengers. And all things considered, I'd much rather be doing anything else than driving for Uber. So in this scenario, yes, Uber is a precarious gig. But how about instead, I'm someone who's working full time, but I'm a bit bored in my free time. I'm relatively new to the city and I don't know a lot of people and I don't know the city very well. But I have a car and I love driving. So I decide to join up as an Uber driver so I can explore my city and get to know it better. And I can meet my passengers and maybe even be able to engage some of them in an interesting conversation. And oh, yeah, I'll make a bit of extra money as an Uber driver. So now Uber is a free agent opportunity. Now, this is a fairly simple example to show that any gig work can be either precarious or desirable and rewarding. And it depends pretty much exclusively on the mindset and the situation of the actual gig worker involved. Now, let's consider Airbnb. My contention is that Airbnb allows more expression of true free agent operation than something like Uber. And that's because in the Airbnb model, you have the latitude to not only set price, but also to define the experience that you are making available to your renters. You have neither of these levers available in the Uber driver model. Now, what this points out is that to operate and thrive in the free agent economy, what free agents need is the ability to discover and describe their own value proposition and then seek out and join those platform communities where that value proposition expression aligns with how the platform allows you to present yourself and operate. Now, let's define this notion of platform community. It's any structure, open or closed, that requires you to participate in that community in a specific way. So clearly, this is Uber, Airbnb, and other software platforms. But you can also think of a traditional organization like Nokia or Google or Shopify and all the others as platforms, as they have defined requirements for how you can participate that you have to conform to or negotiate within to be able to successfully operate as a free agent. Now, the name of this talk is Thriving in the Free Agent Economy. So what does thriving actually look like? And my vision for thriving is this. To really thrive, I need to be clear about what I do and why I do it, and it needs to be meaningful to me. It also needs to be something that others value and are willing to compensate me fairly for the value that I add. To really thrive, there needs to be a diverse set of marketplaces that I can access where I can discover great fit roles, negotiate and qualify for them, and then move into the performance phase. And those various marketplaces would present a number of different ways for me to get compensated fairly for my efforts. They might be fixed price services, could involve licensing agreements around unique IP, could be partial equity ownership positions that grow in proportion to the contributions I make. As a thriving free agent, I want to be able to have some latitude to mix and match opportunity, compensation levels, and ownership rights to optimize my own pipeline of revenue generating activities. And to really thrive, I want to know that I have a solid social safety net that recognizes the nature of operating as a free agent and provides me relevant support services. So, what is the current gap analysis between this vision of a free agent utopia and where we are today? So I believe that there are 4 major focus areas that we need to work on to start to close the gap and move us more solidly toward the free agent vision. First is basic competence to compete. We all need to become better free agents and become better at selling our services on the open market. Next is an expanded opportunity pool. Our organizations need to leverage free agents to become more agile and adaptive to their environment, which in turn will increase the pool of free agent opportunities. Next is collaborative monetizing of our skill sets. So we need to create platforms where free agents can openly collaborate and own a piece of any upside generated through their efforts. And finally, We need enhanced basic support structures. So we need to rethink the whole social safety net around the realities of the emerging free agent economy. So the number one place to start is that we all need to become much better free agents. That means to truly take ownership of our own careers, to be able to clarify, shape, and hone our own specific superpower, to learn how that we add exceptional value and to position ourselves there, and to get really, really good at marketing and selling ourselves. So what can our current institutions do to help? Let's think about our grade schools. We need to teach the above skill set in early high school, or perhaps before, and demystify the whole aura around entrepreneurship, business thinking, risk-taking. We also need to paint a different path to ultimate entrepreneurship. Today, the traditional choices between being a worker for someone else or starting your own venture and ultimately employing others. Traditional employment, with its high fixed cost structure and inherent structural rigidity, is at the heart of both choices. There is another path, from traditional employment, where you gain skills and experience, then to free agency, where you explore your own boundaries and purposes, and then a graceful evolution to true entrepreneurship, where you start an ultimately sellable venture, quite possibly reducing your risk through self-financing and contracting out to other trusted free agents, and possibly for revenue licensing and participatory equity. So that's a third path to entrepreneurship, different than the usual, and it aligns with the free agent evolution path. Now, just so that to let you know, here's what I'm doing in this space right now. I'm working to educate people on the need to develop effective career transition skills as a core skill set for success in the 21st century. We're starting by targeting people that are in an active job search. However, the underlying skills are important for anyone who is facing any reasonable remaining working time in the 21st century, even for those with as little as 5 or less years left to work. Now, if you're interested in sitting through this training and seeing its connection to our talk today, then go to the URL that's shown here and register. It's all completely free. And I'm currently working with a group in Ottawa called the Local Employment Planning Council to embed our methodology into career tools and services used in high schools and post-secondary educational institutions. And hopefully that will spread through Ontario. Now, we're on plan to pilot these workshops over the next few months, and the tools and approaches could then diffuse through the public education system. Next up, our organizations need to start thinking much more strategically about how to leverage free agents to build truly adaptive organizations. Now, in turn, this will expand the universe of available work projects for free agents and make it more attractive to operate as a free agent, which increases the pool of on-demand skills that organizations can tap into easily and with low risk so that they can increase their use of free agents. And so a virtuous circle driving free agent demand is created. It's good for the free agents, it's good for the organization's basic adaptability and overall economics. Now, what does it take to actually do this? For starters, you need to think much differently about organizational design and development and what a truly adaptive, shape-shifting, blended workforce might look like. Now, I'm a big fan of Mad Magazine, and their Spy versus Spy comic evokes a lot of the natural conflicts that we see in our organizations today. HR's credibility versus that of the rest of the leadership team, silo versus silo, HR versus the hiring managers, and ultimately traditional employees versus free agents and their respective acceptance, or lack thereof, that those parties have of each other. So a well-functioning, fluid, blended workforce of employees and free agents collaborating effectively together is a bit of a stretch, and it takes some different thinking to get there. Now, this is kind of ironic, as one of the biggest challenges facing organizations to think differently about their organizational design and development is HR itself. You see, HR's toolkit is pretty outdated. It's entirely based on the concept of a predictable, plannable work environment where work changes slowly, if at all. In fact, I can't think of a single HR-based policy, process, or procedure that is not specifically designed to add rigidity to the organization, which is, of course, the exact opposite of what organizations actually need in today's turbulent and disruptive work environment. Now, one other interesting note to make here. Today, when organizations do use free agents as contractors, consultants, freelancers, they're almost always negotiated and agreed by the hiring manager without the formal involvement of HR. HR is told later, if at all, about the contractor and generally doesn't get involved with them at all, except possibly to have signed paperwork. So the challenge facing today's organization is that someone needs to be thinking about building a truly adaptive work environment, and HR doesn't have the toolkit, thought processes, or any hands-on experience with managing a contracted workforce. So it's a tall order to leave this with HR. Unfortunately, no one else is stepping into the breach. Now, this is a 5-minute talk that I gave to a group of HR practitioners at an event called Disrupt HR. And it lays out exactly how to go about this transformational shift that I just talked about. Now, if this message resonates with you, then please go and listen to this talk. This talk is 5 minutes only, and you can find it by Googling Going Gig, Leveraging the Free Agent Workforce, and you should see this link and connections to Disrupt HR come up. So have a look at that, and if you're interested, we can then talk about how to get that message into your organizational development conversations. And the sooner your organization starts to think this way, the better their chances of negotiating the upcoming disruptions with greater grace and adaptability. Now, as a final thought in this area, there's a really interesting new startup locally in Ottawa that has been incubated inside Pythian, and it's called Tahima. And I think it's a critical missing piece of infrastructure that will allow companies to quickly engage and manage and control free agents, which in turn serves to expand the opportunity pool. Now, basically, what Tahima provides is a cloud-based plugin to the organization so that any supplier, and in our case, we're talking about free agents, can then plug into the company IT infrastructure as easily as if they were part of the organization, but be completely separated, monitored, controlled, logged, and recorded. Now, this nicely deals with the inevitable security concerns all organizations have about the use and support of non-employees. And so it removes one more roadblock to really embracing free agents in all layers and roles of our organizations. Let's now explore the third focus area, what I've called collaborative monetizing. Now, one of the realities of being a free agent is that you're only earning when you're working on a gig. And with your own marketing development, product development, sales and service and accounting and website maintenance and everything else that you need to do, you're typically only actually earning about 1/3 to 1/2 of your working hours. Now, you're also generally putting in a lot of time meeting with other free agents to figure out how to leverage their contacts and knowledge about gigs and to stay connected. Another aspect of being around free agents almost always involves trying to kick off some collaborative ventures with them where you think that together you might be able to do something that alone can't be done, whether because of money, focus, skill set, time, or other resource. Now, mostly these collaborative business development efforts don't culminate in completed initiatives that get all the way to revenue generation. Almost all of them sputter and die before getting anywhere near meaningful fruition. So ultimately, that can be a lot of wasted time that's baked into operating as a free agent. Now, wouldn't it be great if you could find a platform where you could collaborate with other free agents with highly complementary skills to your own, where together as a small team you could jointly contribute all the skills and know-how needed to create a new standalone venture where you all share in the profit upside in proportion to the contributions that you have each made. And as it turns out, if you can describe the work inputs and sequencing that go into any product or service, you can collaboratively monetize it. Now, for a historical model of this, think about 18th century barn raising parties. Everyone would come together on a given day and put all their skills together for a time and raise a barn. Now, in this case, the compensation was that you would get the same help when it came time to raise your barn. But today, you could easily do the same activity, and instead your participation could be measured and converted into credits. And you could use those credits toward your own barn raising. So if you're busy with some other obligations and can only spend half your day helping a neighbor raise your barn, that's okay. You'll only earn half as many credits. Or if you love digging and hate hammering, you'll only sign up to be on the digging team, earn those credits, and stick with the work that you love doing. Now, Black Box Global is a local startup here in Ottawa that fits this space. It was recently presented at TiECon and on Techopia, in case some of you have seen it there, if you've got access to those resources. Now, in a nutshell, it's a collaborative pool of free agents that are all in the video creation space. Now, some love shooting video, some love editing, some are great at keyword describing, some like colorization, etc., etc. So Black Box provides an online platform where they can work together to finalize short clips that are then fed up to the big clip aggregator sites like Pond5, Shutterstock, Adobe, and the like. The Black Box platform performs a number of things to make the free agents more successful. One is it defines the workflows, approvals, and compensation percentages. Who earns what for a finished piece of content that is ultimately sold. Number two, it provides the community where one skill of free agent can find the other skills necessary to assemble the saleable outputs. Number three, it's figured out how to properly populate all the customer-facing aggregators with the free agent-generated output, so free agents don't have to worry about marketing and selling. And four, it manages all of the payment transactions and notifies the free agent with a "you've just got paid" email. Now, this brings us to our fourth focus area, the social safety net. Now, a lot of the components of our current social safety net, things like unemployment insurance, minimum wage regulations, worker compensation boards, maternity and parental leave programs, are specifically designed for a world of traditional employment and don't necessarily map well into the free agent economy. When you move into the world of free agency, there are a lot of things that you need to take care of yourself. Setting up your corporation, should or should not. What is the break point? Employment insurance, it doesn't imply. Insurance coverage, health benefits, those are expensive as there's no group poolings. CPP for the Canadian system. Either do you make payments? Do you make both payments or no payments? Do you remain part of CPP or not? RRSPs, they'll still work, but is it better just to leave those dollars in your private corporation? And there's no matching benefit from my employer, which does happen in the employment world. Pension plans, we don't have these and no one's contributing to this on the behalf of the free agent. private corporation taxation treatment becomes a fairly important aspect of a free agent plan. So needless to say, there are a whole bunch of things in this area that really need a fundamental rethink about purpose, form, and applicability. And unfortunately, most aren't currently very applicable to helping to usher in the free agent economy. Now, one big social safety net component that would be exceptionally well aligned with the free agent economy is a functioning minimum guaranteed income program. Not only would it provide free agents with predictable monthly income during the famine parts of their typical feast and famine cycle, but structured properly, it could also provide some dramatic streamlining and cost cutting of many current government programs that are much more expensive to administer. Employment insurance, parental and maternity programs, and the like. And in fact, just recently, Paul Vallée, who's the CEO of Pythian, which is a company I mentioned earlier, co-authored an open letter to Premier Doug Ford of Ontario against the killing of the current basic income pilot underway in Southern Ontario. And it's worth digging out this and reading the letter. It's very supportive of this notion that we're moving rapidly into a free agent economy, although those words aren't used specifically, and that we need to do more to pilot new ways of thinking about how we support this massive transition of our economy. Now, we've quickly covered here the four main areas where we need to take action to make thriving in the free agent economy a reality. Those are, as individuals, we need to become better free agents. Our organizations need to become much more adaptable, which they can do by learning to leverage free agents much more strategically. Number three, there's an opportunity for free agents everywhere to join collaborative platforms where they can exchange their skills for a piece of the upside. And these collaborative platforms will emerge in any and all industries and sectors where the workflow can be pulled apart and pieces farmed out, which is pretty much in every sector and every product and service offering. And finally, number four, to allow the free agent economy to fully emerge in its most enabling orientation, our society needs to embrace a whole different notion of what a built-for-purpose social safety net looks like and operates like in our 21st century. So thank you very much for sticking with me through this talk. And here's my closing thought. The free agent economy, or its evil twin, the gig economy, is coming at us fast. And the impact on you is when, not if. And you won't see it coming if you're keeping your head down. So get your head up, look around. What's happening around you that changes things in your organization? How and when might it impact you? The clearer you become on what fascinates you, the better and more valuable your opportunities will become. You have a role and opportunity to introduce this kind of thinking into your organization to help build greater adaptability and ultimate survivability. Most importantly, this is a mindset thing. If you choose to be passively carried along by the forces of change, your work contributions will become increasingly devalued and precarious. If instead you choose to embrace it and proactively work to hone your skills in a purposeful way, you can find much greater meaning and ultimately achieve personal security in the free agent economy. Henry Ford put it best when he said, "Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right." Now, I want to thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present my thoughts. And if you want to reach out and connect up with me to discuss these ideas more deeply, I would really, really welcome that. And you can email me at treagan@careerconstructors.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Look for Tim Reagan, Performance Engineer. And if you are up for a short conversation with me, you can schedule a call by using my online scheduler, calendly.com/treagan, as shown in this slide. So again, thank you very much. I hope that this talk has hopefully got you thinking a little bit about how things are coming at us and what we can do about them, and what the sort of shape and size and texture of the rapidly emerging free agent economy might look like. So thank you very much again, and I do look forward to speaking with you if you'd like to reach out to me. Take care. Bye-bye.